Hey guys, welcome back. In our last video, we have created a Spring Batch application which reads from a database and writes the data to a CSV file. So far so good guys. We have created the Spring Batch application by using the concept called by chunk-oriented processing. In chunk-oriented processing, let's suppose that we have here our database. So our database table contains 10 million records. So in chunk-oriented processing, we set the chunk size. In our case, let's suppose that it is 2000, and then we start reading each record or each item until we reach the chunk size. What I mean is we are going to read the first one, the second one, the third one until we reach the 2000. After we reach the chunk size, we start processing all those items that we have just read. So let's suppose that it was also 2000 records. So we process all the records, and then after processing all the records, we are going to write all the records also to our destination. In our case, it was a CSV file. So we are going to write it as a single unit of work. So we are going to repeat it again, okay? We are going to set the chunk size, it's the same. We are going to read all the records until we reach the chunk size. We are going to process all the records until we reach the last one, and then we are going to write them as a single unit of work. And we are going to repeat it until the last record. So now let's suppose that the remaining record is 0, okay, and our chunk size is 2000, and we can just understand that we reached the last one and the exit status of our job is completed. So far so good guys, and you have to understand that the chunk-oriented processing process data in chunks. It reads multiple items, process them, and write them as a single unit of transaction. This is very efficient, for example, if we are processing large data. So let's suppose that we want to use another approach. Okay, the other approach is the tasklet. So the tasklet is for, let's suppose that it's singular tasks. So the tasklet is a single unit of work. It processes data in one step. Typically for example, and when we need to do some operation on our files, for example, after we process, we are going to clean up our directory, or we are going to remove some files, okay? This is the best use case where we can use the tasklet approach, okay? You just have to understand these two concepts, chunk-oriented and tasklet. So far, so good, guys. Now, I'm talking about processing data, processing items, processing data. So what type of data we are talking about? I don't mean the extension of let's say the file, okay? I mean the data itself. So what I want to tell you guys is when we think about the data, we mostly have two types of data, structured data and unstructured data. So the structured data is the data that we can understand that it's very organized information, okay? That most of the case we can see them on our tables, okay, on our database, and they contain the fields, nice format. They are very easy to search and analyze. So what I mean is, for example, the structured data we can understand as, for example, our tables on our database, for example, the CSV file. If you open the CSV file, you will see, right, the content of data. They mostly have a fixed length, right, and so on. And we can understand also the structured data, for example, is a customer record. It can contain names, address, phone numbers, and you can, for example, use, let's suppose that we save these on our database. You can just read, for example, select names from our customer and so on. So this is a very structured data, okay? I'm just trying to illustrate or giving you an example of a structured data. And for example, this kind of data, they are very nice. I was telling you guys, they fit well into our rows and columns of any type of database vendor. For example, Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB, IBM DB2, and so on. So this is what we understand as a structured data, the one that we are processing, for example, in our last video, which it was, I think, sales or something like that. But now, the other side is unstructured data. This is our focus today. Unstructured data, they don't have a specific format. They don't have that kind of fields that I was telling you guys as we have, for example, on our customer in our database, right? You have the columns, you have the type, and so on. And when we think about that unstructured data, they are hard, okay, to organize and to put them in traditional databases. So for example, we can think unstructured data as, for example, a photo. So think about putting a photo in your database. It's very hard. Your music, your podcast, and so on. So as an example, let's suppose that we have here our MP4. So, and we have here our Postgres database or MySQL. You may think, okay, I can export it, right, using Spring Batch and put it to our database. Most of people, they, for example, can even, I don't know, let's say transform it, or yeah, they can just, for example, encode using the base 64 and put in database. And they can try also, for example, the MP3 or even your TikTok, right, post or so, something like that. And I think you cannot do that, right? It's very bad. Your database will not perform, right? This is very bad when you think that you can, for example, persist unstructured data to your database. So, for example, how can we solve this problem, right? The first thing, for example, in our traditional approach could be, for example, okay, we can just create a NFS, right, a network file system, and we can, put it on a folder, right, in a mount. So, for example, you can just create a solution like that. You have your Spring Batch application, which is a cron job running on Kubernetes, and you have your NFS server, and then you have your folders, right, and you can just put it there. I think it's okay, in some cases, in traditional approach, I mean in non-cloud environments, it's okay, it's acceptable. I don't think that you should not do that. On my personal opinion, I will not do that. Instead, I will try to understand how to do it well, how to do it better. So this is what we are going to see in this video. How to store and retrieve unstructured data by using cloud computing solutions. So now, the first thing that we have to understand is the concept called by object storage, okay? So most of people, they call it by cloud object storage, okay? But we can call it by object storage or cloud object storage, it doesn't matter. So what is it? So the cloud object storage is a type of cloud data storage that is designed to store and manage a large amount of unstructured data. So when you think about object storage or cloud object storage, you have to understand the first concept, which is the bucket. The bucket is just a container that we use to store and organize our objects. So when we think about the object, we can understand that object contains data. So the data is the actual file or the content that we want to store, such as image, audio, video, PDF, and so on. Okay? Then it contains also the metadata. This is the information such as the size, the creation date, and so on. So the bucket is the place that we are going to use to store our objects, and the object actually is anything that we have, for example, MP3, PDF, MP4, and so on. So as we can see here, we store our objects to a bucket, okay? So as we can see here is a S3 bucket with objects. This is just the bucket, and this is the bucket with objects. You just have to understand that. It's very simple. So when we think about, for example, the flavors of cloud object storage, we can think, for example, the Microsoft one, the IBM Cloud Object Storage, the Google Cloud Object Storage, right? And the most famous, I think the best solution here, not the best solution, but the most famous solution here is the AWS S3, okay, from Amazon. So what we are going to do in this video? In this video, we are going to create a Spring Batch application which will read from database, okay, we'll write the data to a CSV file, and then we are going to store the result, okay, we are going to store the file to Amazon S3. So if you think about the Amazon S3, the S3 is short form of Simple Storage Service. That's why we call it by S3, like 3S, Simple Storage Service. So this is what we are going to do now, guys. I know that I'm talking too much, but now let's jump to the code. Let's understand everything in practice, and we are coming back here to summarize anything, okay? So don't forget to subscribe and put some like, because it's gonna help our channel. So let's go, guys. So now that we are here on our IntelliJ, the first thing that you need to do is you have to go to our channel, go to the link, let me just see, go to the comment section of our video, this one here. We have here our project on GitHub, just clone this repository and this project, and we can start working with our application. So just remember, the branch is feature export from database to file. This is our Git branch. Now that we have it, let's suppose that you have already set up your environment. You can start analyzing, for example, here the code. We have here our job configuration. We are reading the database using the JDBC paging item reader, and we are writing, okay, to a file. And the file will be this one here. Just take a look in our last video and you will understand. So once we have the file here, what we are going to do in this video is we are just going to upload, okay, we are going to store this file to our S3 bucket. So let's go. So now let's go to our POM. So this is the place that we are going to add some dependencies in order to make our application to interact with Amazon S3. So we are going to use actually the Amazon S3 SDK. Yeah, I think we can just use the Spring Cloud AWS because this is Spring Batch application. It can fit very well. So before that, let me just go here and let's use the theme, okay, lighter, because as we are dealing with YouTube, I think it will be better to use the lighter. So leave in the comment section what you prefer, a dark theme or a more light one that can be better for everyone. So yeah, back on our, let's say, POM XML. So we are going to add here some dependencies. So the first one should be Spring Cloud dependencies. So let's just go to our browser and let's find the Spring Cloud dependencies just like this. Let's use the Spring Cloud dependencies and it should be this one here. So now that we have it like that, let's go back to our application. Let's use as dependency management, and here we are going to add the dependency, okay? So just like that. So the next one that we need to add here is the Spring Cloud AWS context. So let's just go to our Maven repository and let's look for Spring Cloud AWS context, just like that. So now that we have here the Spring Cloud AWS context, let's just get the dependency and let's add here on the dependency section. So now that we have here the dependencies, the next thing that we need to do is we need to create the configuration. So we need to configure our application, our Spring Batch application, in order to talk with the S3 bucket. So in that order, let me just create here a new bin. Let's say Amazon S3 config, just like this. As we can see, it's a configuration. So this is a configuration class. I think we need to put also here as presentation mode, just like this. Yeah, it's better now. So now the first thing that we need to do, we need to create a bin that will allow us to create the Amazon S3 client. Okay, so in that order, return here the Amazon. Yeah, just like this, Amazon S3, and let's call it by Amazon S3. And here we start to create, okay, we start to instantiate it. So it will return in Amazon, just like that, Amazon client builder, okay, like this. We are going to use the standard one, okay, and then we start configure with, for example, with like this, with endpoint configuration. Now that we have here the endpoint configuration, we need to instantiate here the AWS client builder. So the client builder will receive an endpoint. So in that order, let's just create here the string that will get the endpoint. Let's just call it by Cloud Object Storage AWS, okay, endpoint, like just like this. So as always, we are going to use the Spring at value, okay, in order to get it from our let's say application config application that property config files, okay, and so on. So let's just call it by cloud object storage that like AWS that S3 endpoint this, okay. So later we are going to configure this. So this is what we are going to add here as cloud object storage AWS endpoint. The AWS also needs a region, okay, so we are going to use the region. So in that order, I'm just going to use EU, which is Europe, okay, and I'm in South, okay, just like this. And let me just put here the name, okay, just like this. This is the configuration. Let me see here. Yeah, it should be like this. Yes, okay. This is the endpoint configuration. I specify the endpoint here and also the region. Yeah, I need to close. Yeah, I need to close this. So after having the endpoint configuration, the next thing that we need to do is to add, for example, the path style access enable. Okay, so let's just use the path style. Okay, like this. Let's use here the boolean true. Okay, and the next thing that we need to do is also providing the credentials. Okay, so here new, we are going to use AWS static, okay, credential provider. So having here, as we are instantiating, as you can see, it receives an AWS credential. So let's just use here the new, I think we can use the basic, yeah, AWS credentials. It will need the access key and the secret key. So in that order, let's just go back here. Let's use the private string. We need to provide right here, as you can see, we need to provide the access key and the secret key. So in that order, we are going to create here a new variable, which will be the cloud object storage. We are going to call it by cloud object storage AWS access key, like this. And here also we are going to use the Spring. Remember guys, not the Lombok one, but the Spring, okay, value, okay. And here we are going to access it using this expression like that. So we can just call it by cloud object storage that AWS that S3 that credentials that secret, yes, secret key, just like this. I think it's okay. Yeah, now that we have here the secret key, let's add here cloud object storage, yeah, access key, not the secret key. Okay, we have the access key, and now we need also to provide, let me see, yeah, we need to provide the secret key. So let's just copy this line and let's paste it here, and here instead of here it should be the access key, okay, just like that, access key, and here it will be the secret key. So let's just use it like this, secret key. Okay, so now we can just go back here and let's paste it here, the secret key. Okay, so I think this is the basic stuff that we need in order to build, in order to create our AWS client. Remember guys, this is the first approach. We will see a very nice approach where we don't need to specify all this information that we have here. So for now, what we need to understand is that we now can interact with AWS because we have created here the client, okay? But before that, let's try to understand where we are going to get, okay, the cloud object storage endpoint, the access key, and the secret. So let's try to understand it. So now that we have here our AWS client, right? Now we need to get our access key and secret key and so on, right? So this is where we need to go to our, let's say, browser. Let's type the AWS get started with S3, okay? And this is the place that we are going to start configuring everything. But what I want to tell you guys is that even if we want to just make a proof of concept, a POC, right? A proof of concept, or just try to play with Amazon S3, it will require you a credit card, okay, in order to start creating your buckets. So there is not a free, I think there is even a free trial or something like that, but you will need to add your credit card, and which is very bad, right? If we just want to try what is S3 to make some proof of concept, we don't need to put credit card, and I don't have a credit card actually. I'm playing. This is sangria making me feel like that. Anyways, so guys, what we can do in order to let's say to implement our Spring Batch application using the AWS S3. So as I was telling you guys, if we take a look here, we have some flavors. And if you take a look on our example, I was telling you guys that, for example, for our object storage, instead of using the proper AWS, we can use the min IO. So if we just type here, for example, like this, min IO, okay, for example, S3, we will see, okay, the documentation here. So min IO is very nice object storage, okay, that we can use. For example, I use it on my development environment, okay, since I think 2020, yes, since 2020, I have been using the min IO in order to store my images and so on. So min IO is very nice. It have very nice integration with AWS. So now we are going to use the min IO instead of the real AWS. But remember, you can use the min IO in production using the AWS SDK, or you can use pure AWS bucket if you have money to spend on that. And of course you will have. So now what we are going to do, we are going to configure the min IO in order to act as our object storage, okay? So in that order, let's go back here on our IntelliJ. Let me just go here, for example, on the view. What is view? Okay, and let's see the project structure because it's very important. What I want is that you can see, okay, everything that we have on our workspace. So what we are going to do here is we are going to use the Docker Compose that we used in our previous video in order to start a container. So in that order, let me just go here and let's just start adding here a new image. Let's call it by min IO, okay, like this. I think I will configure it, okay, min IO, just like this. And here is provide the image. I will be back once I have, okay, all the configurations that we need for min IO. So now that we are back here, okay, you can see that we have here our Docker Compose file, okay, I will share with you guys. And here we have the image. The image actually is, as you can see, have the min IO. We define the ports, okay. We define also the username, okay, and the password. So we define the credentials and so on. So now let's, I think, yeah, we can just run, okay. I don't have my Docker running on my machine, but for that, let me just run the Docker. It will start the Docker, and I will be back once the Docker is already up. So now let me just try to see here on my terminal if Docker is running. So now that we have here, our Docker Compose is running, okay, as we can see also here. So now the next thing that we need to do is just I think we can just run our containers by using the Docker Compose file. Remember, I have leave here the Docker Compose, right, on my root directory of my project. So in that order, let's just use the Docker Compose. We specify the file, which is the only one that we have here. And let's run the app. So Docker Compose minus file. It will be Docker Compose, yes, app. So just like that, as we can see, min IO is running, as we can see here. Yeah, for the web UI, we can see it here, right? So if we just grab this one here, or even if we just go to our browser, right, and start typing, for example, localhost, this one, okay, we can see here we have our min IO web UI. So far so good, guys. Now, and as we can see, the username is admin and the password is admin. I have it running here, but I think if we just sign out, okay, we can just use the admin and the password is the admin. I think let me go back. Okay, this is the password here. Of course, you should not leave your credentials like that, but it's just for an example. So now that we are here, this is the place that we are going to use in order to create our, let's say, buckets, in order to configure our stuff and so on. Okay, remember, instead of using the AWS, okay, we are just using the min.io. Okay, so for example, the SDK that AWS provides for us, it is compatible for most of the, let's say, cloud object storage. For example, you can use the AWS client, for example, this SDK that we are using here, this client, okay, this client that we have created here, in order to interact with, for example, IBM Cloud Object Storage or min.io or Google Cloud Object Storage, something like that, okay? So now let's see. So we have all this, let's say, configuration, right, that we need to provide. So for example, here we can start, for example, add it like this. Let me just copy all of them. Okay, let's just put here. Of course, all the secrets in your in our production environment, or even in, let's say, local environment, we should save always the secrets in a safe place. For example, we could use the HashiCorp Vault or something like that. Okay, but for our particular example, okay, we are just going to use here, okay, because it's just a video and we don't want to make it to become very complex video and so on. So the first thing that we need to add here, for example, is just the endpoint, right? So the endpoint we can grab here because we already know the endpoint, right? So for example, we can just say, okay, localhost, just like that. Okay, this is the endpoint. And I don't know why it's putting like that, but let's just put it HTTP, just like that. And / local host, and here we specify the port, okay, and here we specify the port. So now how do we get the access key and the secret key? So we just go here on our access key, as we can see, and we can now create our access key. We can specify some name, some description, and so on, but remember, you should always save these credentials. So for example, we could save it on HashiCorp Vault, as I was telling you guys. So now that we have here access key and the secret key, right, that we have just created here, let's just create. Okay, as we can see, this is the one that we have here, right? We could just, for example, copy instead of doing what I did, but it's still the same, okay? You can just copy here, or you can download it and put it in a safe place. Now, this is the place that we need to create the bucket. I was telling you guys that the main concept of object storage is the bucket. The bucket is just the place that we are going to use in order to store and organize our objects. And remember, I was telling you guys that we can understand the object as files. So now let's create our first bucket. Let's give a unique name for our bucket. So I think our bucket will be so sales. Let's just call it by sales, just like that, sales info. And we could, for example, set some version and so on. Okay, you can exploit it later. So we create our bucket. As we can see, we have the bucket here, sales info, we have sales. We could, for example, create a new bucket, for example, customers, right? Customers. So we can create the buckets as much as we want, having in consideration the pricing and so on, if you are running on a third party or software as a service. And yeah, guys, you can explore a little bit more here, but let's focus on our video, because the intention is to store the CSV into our bucket. So let's go back. So now coming here back, let me just go back to presentation mode, because now is the time that we are going to code a little bit more. Let's go to presentation mode. After having the presentation mode, we want to see the project structure. Yes, so just like that. So now here on our project, let me just put it like this. I think the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to create a service in order to give here very nice let's say separation in terms of project structure. So we are going to create here a new service, and let's use this interface. I think it's better, and let's call it by store file to object storage use case. Let's just call it by use case. So having it like that, let's explore a little bit more about the AWS SDK. So the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to create a method which will allow us to store, okay, to store to AWS. And as we can, for example, in the future, let's suppose that we are going to change from AWS S3 SDK to another one, but we are going to use, of course, AWS SDK. Let's just create here an object, let's call it by object DTO, okay, which will be our let me just say, like, it will be our DTO that we will use in order to map from our DTO to the real Amazon S3 object. So in that order, let me just create here, it will be a record, and I will put it on a DTO package, just like this. And here is the place that we are going to give here some arguments or some fields. For example, the object should have a name, it should contain, for example, the content type. It should also, for example, have the size, and let's say the data itself, okay? The data we are going to represent is as a byte array. So just like this. Now, if we go back here, we have it here already. Yeah, I think it's okay, okay? It's okay like that. Now, let's just create here a new package in order to follow the layered architecture. So here we are going to create the service itself, the implementation. So it will be store file to object storage implementation. Service implementation, just like that. And it implements the store, right? It will implement our, let's say, our use case. So this interface, okay, will be implemented by this concrete class. So having it like that, of course, it needs us to create the methods, right? To implement or to override the methods. Now, this is the place that we are going to start interact with AWS. Remember, guys, we have created here our, let's say, AWS or Amazon S3, okay? Amazon S3 client, right? Which is this one here. So here on our service is the place that we are going to, let's say, inject, okay? Like that. So let's just use Amazon S3, just like that. Amazon S3, this is the client. It's, of course, complaining because we need to inject this as a dependency because it is, right? Because this is a bin, okay? And the bin should be injected. So in that order, first let's use the Lombok required args constructor, just like this, because this will help us to inject, okay, through constructor, which is the best approach. So now that we have here the Amazon, right, the Amazon S3, I think the next thing that we are going to do, we are going to check if the bucket exists. So in order to check like that, I think let's go back here also on our let's say interface, our use case, okay? We are going to create a new method that will allow us to create the bucket if it does not exist. Of course, in production, maybe this is not the desired behavior, right? Because maybe your application should not create the bucket. But let's just use it in our video, okay? Because sometime even in production it can be possible, okay? It depends on your governance and the rules that you guys will apply, okay? So let's just use it like that. Create bucket if does not exist. just like this. And here we are going to receive the bucket name. So now let's go back to our service, which is the one that's implementing, okay, this interface. And here on our service, of course, we just need to, in my case, in MacBook, I just need to Command N, right? And here I just need to implement the method, just like this. Yeah, the first thing that I like to do, as always, is to validate, okay? So I'm just going to validate if the string is not null, okay? Yes, I think it could be null, but it could also be, for example, empty, of course. But yeah, let's just use here some validation. For example, assert that, for example, has text, okay? So the bucket should have text. So just like that, okay? The bucket name should have text, or should not be blank. So just like that. This is a small validation because it's a best practice. So let's try to put it better here, right? Of course. And I will also use here as a final, so no one can change this one. Now, I think we can now start using the Amazon, right? The Amazon S3 in order to explore the API. So as we can see, the Amazon S3 already provide us some very nice APIs. For example, we can list the objects, right? We can list the objects. We can check if the bucket exists. We can get the object. We can create bucket and so on. So what we are going to do here right now is, for example, we are going to check if bucket does not exist. So let's put here the bucket name. Okay. So just like that. Oh, I hate this negative. But anyways, let's just use it like this. So if bucket does not exist, so we are going to use the Amazon S3, okay, in order to create the bucket. So let's just create the bucket. Of course, you could create with region, but it's deprecated already. But here is the place that we are going to create the bucket, just like this. Okay, so now here, the first thing that we are going to do is, let's just create here. So for example, create the bucket if does not exist. And I think we need also to provide, for example, just like that, private, for example, string, Amazon, S3 bucket, or just, let's just call it by bucket, right? Bucket, yeah, just like that, bucket. And here we are going to use at value. Remember guys, it's not the long block, but it is the Spring at value, okay? So org Spring Framework, blah, blah, blah. So here we just use it like that, and we call it by cloud object storage that bucket that name, for example, just like this. And let's go here, for example, on our application properties, and let's just follow the same naming convention, okay, just like this. Okay, so just like this, and the name, it will be sales info. Okay, so the bucket name will be sales info in order to match the one that we have here. For example, in order to match this one here, sales info. Remember, we created already the bucket. I'm just exploring the AWS S3, okay, SDK. So let's just go back here on our IntelliJ. Let's copy, okay, this property that we have here, and let's now paste it here. Let's replace it here. All right, guys, I hope that you are following, but we are creating the bucket if it does not exist. So this is now the place that we need to start uploading our, let's say, file, right? We are going to upload our object. So remember, this is our DTO that we have here, okay? And yeah, let's try to use the Amazon S3. The method that we need to use in order to upload the object will be this put object. It will receive some arguments and so on, so we can explore most of them. Let's suppose this one here. And yeah, just like this. So if we download the resources, yeah, amazing one. So as we can see, it will receive the bucket name, the key, which is the name, right? The key is the unique name. So you can explore a little bit more the SDK documentation. But as you can see, upload a specific input stream and object metadata to Amazon S3 under the specified bucket and key name. So we are going to use this method here. Yeah, before that, what we need to do, we need to map, right? We need to map our object DTO to the one that Amazon S3 receive. Okay, for example, as we can see here, the last one is the object metadata. So the object metadata is very nice because we will use some user predefined metadata. So in that order, I think we are going to create, as you can see, this is the object metadata. So we are going to create here a new method. I think this one finish here. Oh, that's the main reason I like, for example, Maven check style, because it will format my code and I will not be lost in order to, yeah. Anyways, so in order to do that, let's just create here the method and we will return the object metadata, which is the com AWS, okay, Amazon AWS service S3 model, okay, so we are going to return the object metadata and let's add a method which the naming will always express the intention. So let's just say, for example, object DTO to S3 object metadata. DTO S3 object metadata, just like this. So here we are going to receive the object DTO, right? Because we are going to map from object DTO, right, to the one that Amazon is expecting to receive on our when we try to upload. So as always, let me just put here some small validation, object that requires no null, and we are going to say, okay, the object DTO should not be null. So the object DTO should not be null. And here is the place that we need to start, for example, instantiating the object metadata. So we instantiate the object metadata just like that. Object metadata is equal new object metadata. So as we are using Java 21, okay, we can just use it like this, okay? And now this is the place that we are going to start putting some attributes. For example, we can add user metadata. We can say, okay, file name, and here we are going to get, for example, we are going to get from our object DTO the name, and we can, for example, add also some other user metadata, which is our metadata that we are going to add, okay? So the key, for example, will be store date. Of course, most of this metadata Amazon S3 will already give it to us, but I'm just exploring the API, okay? So let's put here, yeah, to string, just like that, local date time to string, and I think, yeah, that's okay. So now let's add what we need really to add, which is the content type. Set the content, yeah, the content type. We are going to get the content type, of course, from our object DTO, just like this. And of course, we also need to specify, for example, the length, right? So we are going to get, so just like that. I think the length is content length, just like this, yes. And how we are going to say the content length, I don't know if it will be accurate, but it's okay. So we are just going to get, I think, the data, right, that length. Yeah, the size maybe, yeah, but let's just use it like that. It should be the size, but let's just use it like that. So here we are going to return the object metadata, just like that. So now that we have the method, right, that we are going to use in order to map, right, our DTO to the Amazon AWS object metadata, we can just go here, for example, and we can call, for example, map, right? And it's going to receive the object metadata. It will return for us the object metadata from Amazon S3, right? And now here we can use the Amazon.put object in order to upload, right? Amazon put object in order to upload our, let's say, object, right, to S3 bucket, okay? As you can see, under a specified bucket and the key name. So yeah, now here we specify the bucket, right? And we also specify the key. The key actually will be the file name, okay? So as we can see here, if I just put here, it's the IDE is helping us to understand. So we are going to use this method here. It's expecting the key, right? The key will be the file name. So let's just get from our object DTO.get name. And then it needs the input stream input, which in our case is the content, right? So here we can just use the byte array input stream, just like that. So here we can just get the data. And I think the last argument is the object metadata, which is this one here, right? That we have just mapped. So here we are going to specify the object metadata. So let's just use it like that. It will return a put result, okay, like this. I hope you guys can see it, okay, but it's actually just like that, okay, in order to make it visible. I think we can, for example, log, okay, let's just log like this, log.info, and here we are going to say, for example, the object. We say the name of the object, just like this. The object has, yes, been stored, okay? And here, for example, we can specify the metadata info or the metadata short info. So just like this, short info is, we can specify here, yeah, the arguments. So the object, which object, we are going to say object.getName, which is the name of our file, okay? And here we specify, for example, the put result. So just like this. So in order to add the log here, we just need to, for example, add the annotation of Lombok, okay? This one here, and we can see here the log is already running. So as we are returning the string, so I think we can just return, I don't know, maybe, yeah, the object name. So the object metadata that, what is the file name, what we can return here. I think we can just return the object DTO.name, okay? Because this is the file that we have just uploaded, guys. So this is very nice. We have already here our, I think we can also, for example, add here the var, but later someone will not be able to explore, right, the object. And so let's just put here like this, okay? So this is what we have here. The first thing that we have done, okay, we inject the Amazon S3 client, right, which is provided by our bin, as we have here the configuration. So we provided it here. And the first, also we have here the bucket name. The second thing was, okay, in order to upload the object to our bucket, okay, to our S3 bucket, we need to create the bucket if it does not exist. Of course it exists, and sometimes our application should not be or should not have permission to create some buckets, but anyways, let's just keep the example. So if the bucket does not exist, okay, we create the bucket. So after creating the bucket, we map our object DTO, okay, to the one that Amazon needs, for example, with the object metadata, where we can use, for example, some user, let's say user metadata. For example, you want to add some more, let's say, information for your object. So this is the intention of using the user metadata. So after having the object metadata, we use the Amazon S3 put object that allow us to upload the specific input stream, okay, and the object metadata to Amazon S3. So yeah, I think this is okay for now. Now let's move to Spring Batch stuff. Let's just create a tasklet that will call this service or this use case and service implementation in order to upload the file. So let's go. So before creating our object, as we can see here, our IDE is telling us that we have a problem here, but it's not a big deal. It's just a semicolon here. And yeah, now let's start adding here some tasklet. Guys, remember, when we start the video, we understood that a tasklet, let me just go back here on our presentation. We understood that our job has been built using the chunk-oriented processing, but we also discussed about tasklet, which is nice for singular tasks. For example, cleaning a directory. Now we are going to use the tasklet in order to upload the file. So when you do a single task, uploading the file is a single task and should work in a single transaction. Okay, that's why we were thinking about tasklet. It's a single unit of work. For example, uploading the file. Okay, so in that order, let's go back here and let's create our tasklet. Let's create a new package and let's call it by task, just like that. And here our task will be, for example, I think upload, right? Upload file to S3 bucket, just like that. And of course, as it's a tasklet, it's a task in Spring Batch, we need to use the interface tasklet, just like this. And we need also to implement the methods. So now that we have here is the place that we are going to work adding the functionality in order to upload the file. So the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to use, of course, this service, right? In order to upload, because this is the service contained implementation that allow us to store, right? Let's just go here to our tasklet, okay? But the name should be also tasklet. Let me just give here the suffix, okay? Like tasklet, yeah, like this, because people will understand that it's a tasklet. Anyways, it implements tasklet. Anyways, okay, so now let's inject our service, which is store file to object storage use case. So, of course, it's complaining. Let's use the Lombok require args constructor, which will allow us to inject this dependency, okay, using the constructor injection. So now let's use here, let's log some stuff because it is very nice in order to give us some explanation when we run our application. So for example, of course, guys, this is not very nice practice to log, but here we are just going to say, okay, now storing files to bucket, okay, on S3, just like this. And of course, let's use also the Lombok annotation, okay, it's L4J, just like that. And here we need to start uploading the file. So let's use the file objects, the file to object store. And here, I think, yeah, and here we are going to use the method store. Yeah, how we are going to upload, okay, how we are going to get the object. Remember, the object that we are receiving here, okay, is just our DTO, okay, this one here, which contains file name, the content type, and so on. So now that we are here, I think it's very easy for me, okay, because we can use something very nice in Spring. Remember, when we run our application, okay, we are specifying, if you remember in the last video, we talked about the Spring expression library and late binding and so on, okay? And if you understand, go back to that video, you will understand. So we are passing as our job param, okay, a parameter which is output that file name. So if I copy this output file name and go back here on our tasklet, I can get it, okay? I can get this param. For example, I will just put here like this, let's string, okay? The string, it will be output file. So now let's use the Spring expression language in order to get some params from our job parameter. as I was telling you guys, okay, this param that we have here. In order to get it, so we are going to use, for example, here at value. Remember, it should be the Spring Framework value, okay? I have been telling you guys this because you can just mess up and it will not work. And then we are going to use, okay, the job like that, job parameter like this, the job parameters, and then we just use here our param. Yes, so let's just add here. So here is the place that we are going to use our param, okay, which is this one, output that file that name. So in that order, let's go back here, okay, you just use it like this, and yeah, it's ready. So using it like this, we are getting from our job parameter, okay, this param. So now that we have this parameter, this is the time that we can now, for example, store, okay, the file that we are getting, okay, from the output file. In that order, I think the first thing that we need to do, we need to create, right, the as we can see here, it received an object DTO. So in that order, let's just call it by object DTO like this, and let's instantiate the object DTO. So in order to instantiate the object DTO, we need the file name, right? I don't know if we have here in the parameters the file name. Let me just see. Okay, this is the file name we have already, right? So we're just going to use the file name. So I think the output file is actually the file name. I don't know. So what we can do here is, for example, we are just going to say, okay, string like file name is equal new file, okay, just like this, and we pass here the output that file name, and we can just get the file name, okay, so just like that. So having the file name, this is the place that we need, right, to add here the file name, because as you remember, it receives the file name, the content type, the size, and the data. So now we have the file name. The next thing that we need is the content type. So what is the type of file? If it's a let's say JSON, CSV, TXT, and so on. So in that order, in order to get, for example, the content type of the file, we can just use the class files, okay, that prob content type, okay, and here we pass the path. So the path actually is this one, right? So in that order, let's just use path that off, okay, and we pass here the output, this one here, output file, okay, in order to get the path. So having it like that, we can just say here, okay, this is the content type of the file, and then we can add it also here, content type, and now we need also the size, right? So I think the size we can just get also using this is very nice, okay, the new package, as you can see, has a lot of methods that will help us to work with file. For example, if you want to get the size of a file, you can just use the size, as you can see here, like that. And here we, for example, pass, I think we can also, let me just, okay, in order to make it very easy, let me just use here path for off, okay, and we pass it like that. And here we say, okay, this is the size, right? And we pass here the size. So we are constructing our object DTO, as we can see here. This is the size. And then we need to pass the data. So the data actually is a byte array, as we can see. And we can also use the same class, which is files that, for example, read all bytes, okay? And we pass the path. So as you can see, we are just always using the same path of, right? So I think we can just, for example, create it like this, and we say, okay, this is the path, okay, the file path like this, and here we can refactor it, okay, by putting here the path And here in the size we paste, we can paste the path also, and here, okay, we paste also the file path. So when you do that, okay, now we are going to get, for example, the data. So this is the data, and we pass it here, data, like that. So let me just organize this code, Option, Command, and L, so it formats my code, as you can see here, okay, it just formatted my code. And yeah, let me just show you guys. We have got the file name, okay, of course we could just get this one that we have here. I think output that file that name. If we go here, yeah, it's output that file that name, okay. So after having that, we could, for example, just pass here, right, the output that file that name. So we have the name of the file, okay, and then we create this path because we need it to use on our, let's say, in order to get the content type of the file, okay. So we have the content type here, and then we just use the files that size, which gives you the size, okay, as you can, for example, read the documentation, and then we are using the read bytes in order to get the data. So having it like that, for example, we have already our object DTO that we are going to use here in our service, right? This service is the one that is interacting with our Amazon S3 client. So let's just go back here on our tasklet. Remember, this is our tasklet. Here on our tasklet, we can just add, for example, the object like this. And here it will return as, for example, I think the file uploaded, just like that. So, but before that, I think I have to give you some considerations, okay, something that you have to keep in mind. For example, when you use this method here, it's nice to read all bytes from a file, okay? It's okay, but remember, this is not good for big files, okay? So as you can see here in the documentation, guys, always read the documentation. For example, if you use it for very big file, okay, very large file, you can get, for example, out of memory, because you are going to read all in memory. Just remember, you can use, for example, in order to read the content of a file, you can use the buffer reader or something like that, okay? Remember, always read the documentation. Everything is there, okay? And know when you need to use some APIs and when not, okay? So for our case, let's just do it like that. So now we have here our object. Now it's time to return. Instead of returning null, we are going to return the repeat status that finished, okay? So what is the difference between the repeat status finished and continue? So when you do finish, for example, it means that this task that we are running here, okay, will finish after we return. If you want to use, for example, for some iterations and then finish, you can use your business logic returning, for example, repeat status continuable when you need to continue, and if you want to finish, use the repeat status finished, but using your logic, okay, because it's not automatic. Yeah, I think it's okay. It's a messy code here, okay. I think we can also, for example, say here that I'm just going to refactor it because I don't like a method very big like that. So in order to refactor, I just use here my keyboards and I say here, okay, extract, okay, method, just like that. And I even think, yeah, we are going to pass all of these, okay, just like that. And I'm going to refactor it. And let's say, okay, map to object DTO, just like that, as you can see. Okay, now we have here a new method, okay, very more I can say, and let's just return it in line, just like that. And here we have a very I think it's not the best one, but now it's better, okay, in terms of readability. So we have here this method that just map, okay, to our object DTO. I think it's just creating the object DTO. Okay, we have it here. okay, and then we use here the object DTO in order to upload. Yeah, I think the last thing that we can do, let's just log here, for example, log that info, and I can tell you that, for example, let me just put it like that because it's just to illustrate you guys, okay, just like that. Okay, we can just, for example, do it like this, but I think we can also leave it like, yeah, okay, I think it's nice for now. Okay, then we can just organize the code, but I want you guys to read. Okay, always think about organizing, understand your pattern or your format, okay, of your code. You can use, for example, as I was telling you guys, Maven check style to organize or format your code. Yeah, now that we have it like that, now let's use our tasklet. Let's use our tasklet in our Spring Batch job. So now that we are here on our job, okay, this is our job config. Just take a look here. This is our job config. I was showing you guys in the beginning of this video. So what we are going to do, we need to inject this task that we have created here, the task that will be responsible for mapping and upload it to S3 bucket. And here we can just, for example, use the upload, okay, upload file to S3 bucket tasklet. So let's just call it by, I think, like that, okay. And it's, yeah, it's saying that it's not a bin. So of course we need just to go back here and say that, okay, in order to inject it, it should be a component, okay. Just remember, it should be a bin like that. So here also is telling that it's not a bin. So let's go back to our use case, guys. Go back to your use case, see the implementation, and add component, okay, in order to inject it as, let's say, a bin. So here, let's just remove the final. This is how we have our use case. And for example, here our tasklet, okay, as we can see, there is no more warning here, and it's a component. Both of them, they are components. So let's go back to our export sales job config, and here, let me put here like that. So having our tasklet here, we need to create a new step, okay. So our job will have two steps, right? The first one is the step that we have already done on the previous video, which reads from sales table and write it to a file. Now, the next step, this is the one that we are going to create here. It will be a tasklet step, okay? The next step will be tasklet step, not the chunk step, okay? Remember, this is the chunk step, okay? And now we are going to create a tasklet step. So in that order, let's just use here like a step, like that. Let's say, okay, upload file to S3, okay, just like that, step. Let's call it by step. I think it's a step, calling it by step. Let's just use it like this. And here is the place that we are going to create our step. In order to create a tasklet step, you just need to instantiate the tasklet step builder, okay, this one here, tasklet step builder, like that. And here you can create a new step builder, just like this, step builder, okay. And the step builder always receives a name, as you can see, receives a name and job repository. So the name, we are going to say, okay, it's upload file to S3, okay. Yeah, the job repository, like that, okay. Where is the job repository? Job repository is here, okay. We have injected in previous video. If you get this GitHub repository, okay, you can see it here. So now that we have here our job repository, I think this is the place that we need to add the tasklet. So let's just use here tasklet, just like that. So where is the tasklet? Our tasklet is this one that we have just injected here, okay. Upload file to S3 bucket tasklet, because it implements the tasklet, okay. So let's go back to our job, and here let's use the upload, and here it needs also the transaction manager. I think we have already transaction manager injected, so you can just get it here. Okay, this is the transaction manager, and as you can see we have here this, and now we can just call it by build, just like that. And also, okay, it will be for us a bin like this. Let's also format in order to make it better. Let's go back to our job here. Okay, our job, we can see that we have the first step, which is the start. Okay, we'll read from, okay, reads and write to a file. Okay, now the next step, so we use the next, okay, will be upload, okay, file to S3. So this will be, okay, just like that, because the name speaks for itself. It's better than giving comment here. Okay, so now we have it like this. Yeah, I think this is time to summarize everything and try to run our application. So this is what we have in terms of our step. The only thing that we have added, we start our video by creating here a new use case which contains, for example, two implementation, okay, store. I think the use case should be a single method, but anyways, we have store, okay, and we have create bucket if does not exist. Then we create a new class that will implement that use case. This we have also here the Amazon client and so on. Okay, so this one, Amazon S3 client, we add the configuration and so on. So guys, now let's just run our, let's say, yeah, let me remove first. Okay, this was the last executions from previous video, and now we are going to run our job, okay, in order to see it working and putting the data to S3. But before that, let's go back to our browser. Let me just close this article that I was reading, and here let me see. Okay, let's open the credentials. We can see it here. So now let's run our application, but before that, let me see if we have all our tables ready here. Let me just refresh. Okay, everything is okay, but let me just take a look here. Okay, we still having some data there. Okay, so now let's run our application. Let me just, okay, put it like this, and here let's go, and then we run our application. Okay, we got an exception. Okay, the job parameter cannot be bound to object, maybe not public or valid. Okay, so that's okay, and it happened in our tasklet. So my bad, it's saying that, okay, it should be, it can be, actually it can be private, okay, but the only problem that I can see here is that it's not binded to a step scope. Okay, so it should be bound by a step scope, just like that, because I know, okay, because we are trying to get this one, but it's not at step scope. So now let's run once again. Okay, now our application has started. So if we go back here on our schedule, we're gonna see that it's running, okay, every 40, let's say every 40 second, sorry, every 40 minutes. Okay, let me just put here that it will run every, I don't know, I think it should be like this. Okay, so let's just put it like that. Okay, it will run like this. If we could, for example, set here a fixed delay, I think it's a cron. Okay, we can just say, okay, fixed delay. Okay, of course it will be a cron, but as I want, I just want to show you guys. Okay, so let's just say the fixed delay will be 1 second. Okay, What does it mean? So that we are going to run this application in it instead of using cron. Okay, of course we are going to use cron later, but instead of using cron, we are going to start the application once our Spring Batch is up. Okay, and for every single, let's say, next run, so for every single next run, we are going to give a delay of 1 second. Okay, if you don't want to do that, you can just say, okay, fixed rate. Okay, just like that. So let's try like this, because we don't want to wait so much. Okay, now it's working. Okay, so all right, it was working and so on. Okay, so now let's take a look here. Let's refresh our from disk. Okay, we can see that we have here this file. Okay, this is the date that I'm recording this video. So if we go back to our browser, remember that we are saving, okay, here on S3 bucket. Now let's refresh. Okay, let's go here to our bucket, just like this. And now this is the place that we are going to browse. Okay, whoa, we can see this is exact time, as you can see here. Okay, this is the exact time. So if we just take a look here, we have the file uploaded here. Maybe it was so fast because I put here fixed delay like that, but I'm going to add yeah, guys, I have this one here. This is actually the Digma, right? That is inspecting my job. I will make another video about the tools that I use in order to see the performance and so on. Okay, and yeah, let's just forget about Digma for now, because it's telling us that it can cause performance and so on. But I'm willing to put here, for example, delay, let's say 1 minute. Okay, just like that. And in order to make the test better, let's go here. For example, the output file name can be, let's see, let's go back on our, so like this. Let's just put here, for example, saying, okay, sales info. Remember, if we take a look here on our bucket, we have this file, right? We uploaded the file. Everything worked as expected, but we had that delay that was so small and we couldn't see things happening. So now let's run it once again. Okay, now let's stop the application because I don't want it to run multiple times. All right, so as we can see, we have processed the file, right? And then we start another step, which is the one that we are using to store the file to a S3 bucket. So then we just say, okay, the file has been stored with this name here, right? And if we go back here in our browser, if we just refresh, I think if we just go back, okay, and refresh it, yeah, we can see the file is here. Okay, so we have two files. And if you just try to inspect, I think this guy, it is not an image, you cannot inspect it, right? But if you just download the file like this and open, for example, let me open the file. Here is the file. Okay, this is the way that we upload the file by using the S3, okay, and Spring Batch. So we have our Spring Batch application reading from database, doing some filtering, right? So if we just go back here, let me go back here. So we are doing some filtering here, which is processing. If you go to our item processor, you will understand what we were doing. Okay, we're just filtering some, let's say, records or items, and after that we just go and write. We are writing on our disk, but let's suppose that we in production we could, for example, write it somewhere. Okay, but we have our file, and then after having the file, we use our tasklet to upload the file, okay, to Amazon S3 bucket. Remember that as we don't want to spend in this video We don't want to use our credit card in order to create an Amazon account and then start using S3. We use this very nice tool which is Min.io. Min.io is also a cloud object storage. You can use the Min.io, also has its own SDK, but as Amazon and, for example, IBM Cloud, right? IBM Cloud Object Storage, Amazon, and so on, all of them, I think most of them, each one, okay, most of them have like their own SDK. You can use the code that we have just done here in order to interact with IBM Cloud Object Storage, even if we are talking about S3 APIs, okay? You can use it also for Google and also for Min.io, which is the one that we are using as our backend here on our example, okay? So we use our Docker, and our Docker contains the S3 on top of Min.io. So this is the first part, guys. This is the first part. We are uploading files, right? So we are uploading files to an S3 using Spring Batch and Amazon SDK. Now, the next video, we are going to download these files, okay? So we are going to have a job that will download the files from S3 and process it. You should always understand that you don't need to process everything in memory. Sometimes streaming and sometimes doing some stuff is the best approach, okay, for processing this kind of data. So guys, the video is becoming so long, okay? Now I'm going to do the second part, and then we are going to have the final example, right? So we are going to have the one that uploads file and the one that downloads the file. And later maybe we can explore a little bit more. So don't forget to subscribe and put some like, because it's gonna help our channel. So let's go, guys.